Hey there, I'm srcmake, and this video is going to be a getting started guide to Hyperledger Iroha. So in this video, we are going to go over what Aroha is. We're going to go over some useful terminology and concepts for Aroha. We're going to create our own Aroha network on our local computer. We're going to interact with that Aroha network by making transactions. And finally, we are going to make some queries to see what assets and data we have in our actual Aroha network. So all of these resources are going to be on my website, and if you click the link below the video, you'll get to this webpage. It's really useful to follow along. If you want to try this yourself, go ahead and do so. And while you're down there, hit the subscribe button for this YouTube channel. Thanks. So let's get started. Hyperledger is an open source collaborative effort created to advance blockchain technologies. They're basically an organization that does blockchain stuff. And Hyperledger has a number of projects. They have 10 right now that you can see. One of them happens to be Aroha, but there are a bunch of other, projects that there's being work done on them. And if you want to participate, you can, of course. These are all open source. We'll do another video on how to contribute to Hyperledger. But today we're going to look at getting started with Aroha. And Aroha is a blockchain platform implementation meant for simpling modeling of financial transactions. And basically what that means is if you have an asset with some quantity on it and you need to assign it to a certain person, Aroha is great for modeling that. So maybe you have 100 forks and 200 spoons. You can easily model that on the blockchain using Aroha, which is really useful because that's what everyone talks about when they talk about blockchain. They like to talk about modeling, and Aroha is great for doing that. So we're going to look at some Aroha terminology to get us started. And to do this, we're going to create a really simple model for us. So maybe we own a farm and its name is srcmake farm. Let me make that a little bit bigger. Maybe we own a farm and its name is srcmake farm, and we have, the usual farm stuff, some sheep, some corn, a barn, and, some other stuff on our land. And maybe we also have a few workers on our farm that we want to model on the blockchain. So with that in mind, let's go over some Aroha terminology. So an asset is any countable commodity or value. It could be currency like dollars, or it could be, the sheep, the corn, the windows, anything that can be counted on the blockchain. So maybe we have an asset named sheep on our blockchain. That's what we're going to be using. An account is just an entity that's able to perform a specified set of actions. And for example, maybe one of our farm boys who feed the sheep, they have their own account on the blockchain that we represent them with. So a domain next up is the assets and accounts are labeled with this domain. So in our example, our farm is named srcmake farm. So all of our sheep, we want to tag them with srcmake farm just so that we know they're our sheep and not some other farm sheep. And, our farm boy account too, he's the farm boy for our farm, srcmake farm. So we're going to tag him with our domain. It's just basically the label that you want to group assets and accounts with. And next up, we have permissions. So a permission is basically, does an account have the privilege to perform a certain command? For example, to transfer sheep from srcmake farm might require the can transfer permission. But maybe we don't want our farm boy to be able to transfer our sheep because, he could steal sheep from us. So we just don't give him that permission. Accounts get permissions. That's how it goes. But actually, it's not the account that gets the permission itself. They get what's called a role. So a role is just a group of permissions. So maybe we want the farm boy to count how many sheep that we have, but not transfer them. So we would create a role for that farm boy that is able to count our assets, but he's not able to transfer them. So that group of permissions is labeled, they're given to a role, and that role is attached to an account. So that's the way roles work. They work, in tandem, roles and permissions. Next, we have a transaction, and a transaction is just a set of commands. We don't have commands defined because, it's just like the English word. You want to do something, you want to maybe add 20 sheep assets, that's a command. You want to remove 40 sheep food assets, that's another command. You put those together and that just forms, one transaction that we push onto the blockchain at one time, if that's how we want to do those commands. So that's a transaction. And finally, a query is just checking the state of the data in the system. So maybe we want to check how much sheep food we have at srcmake farm, and that's a valid query that we can do. So yeah, it's really basic English stuff. So hopefully we got through that stuff easily. Of course, there are a lot more terms, like blockchain terms, to know how Aroha is working in the back, and we'll do another blog post on that. But for now, let's just get started with, setting up this Aroha network, which is what we're going to do right now. So you can do this from we're going to set up an Aroha network, and we need Docker right now. You don't need to use Docker technically, but we're going to use Docker. So you can use any Unix style terminal. I could actually open up one on Windows right now if I wanted to, a bash terminal. You could do it from Mac, but personally, I've got this Ubuntu 16.04 virtual machine running. I like to do my stuff on Ubuntu, so that's what we're going to use for this tutorial. Any sort of Linux or Mac stuff should work, but I'm just letting you know that I'm using Ubuntu just to get through this tutorial because I like to use Linux. So let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, that looks perfect. So I've got our project directory right here, and that's what we're going to get started with. So to start out with, you need to install Docker if you don't already have it installed. For Ubuntu, I have the commands right here. I think I already have Docker installed on my system, to be honest. But let's just go ahead and do it together anyway, just in case. Because I love it when tutorials go through everything so that there's not like, maybe my computer has some library errors and I hate it when that happens in tutorials and I get some errors. So let's just do everything together. So I just did the first command to install curl. I copied and pasted. These commands they're running right now, and yeah, so that's it. So that's going to install Docker. We can make this terminal a little smaller. We're going to go through all this installation together, so sit tight, and I'll explain things as we go along. So this Docker network is basically going to contain our PostgreSQL database, and it's going to hold our Aroha network that we're creating right now. I just want to explain that. And you can see that we're creating this network with this command. So let's go ahead and run it. Sudo docker network create. Really simple. You get that returned. Next, we're going to add PostgreSQL to the network because we need it. And this is the command for it. Now, I'm just going to press enter right now. And I don't have Postgres installed locally, so it's just going to install it, download it right now for us. And one thing to note is that we are specifying the port to be 5432. Now, something else I can mention right now is that what we're doing is we're following basically this getting started guide but with our own little twist on it. So if you want to follow the official instructions for Aroha, go ahead and go to this page. There'll be a link to it on the webpage, of course. You just saw me click it. And it has a lot more detailed, it doesn't have a lot more detailed explanation, but they explain what's going on. So that's really nice. You can use that as another resource if you want. We're just trying to get through it in our own really simple way. So Postgres got installed. Now we're going to create a volume for the block store. Remember, we're doing blockchain and we need to store the blocks in some actual volume. So that's what we're doing here. Next, we're going to install Git, and this is going to be the interesting part. So we're still setting up our network right now. We need Git, and the reason we need Git is because when you set up a network, and Git's already installed for me, so I'm just going to git clone the develop branch of, you can't see, can you? Let me scroll down a little bit. So we're just going to clone the develop branch for the Aroha open source project on GitHub, and that's done. And I'll explain this in a second, but what we need to do next is we're going to run the example how would you say this? The example network that they have set up for us. So they set up an example network, and basically we're just going to be running it. So I'll explain it in a sec because I think we're going to have a little bit of downtime. Maybe this is a downtime. But anytime you create a blockchain, you need what's called a genesis block, right? The very first block that starts the chain. And in particular, this blockchain, they set it up for us, the genesis block, and they set up a few other things to get through this tutorial, which is going to make our lives a little easier. You can do it yourself when you're setting up your own blockchain for your own network, but for this getting started guide, we'll just use what they're doing. So you can see right here that we logged into this Docker container. So we're in this Docker container right now. You see our terminal changed, and now we are just going to actually run Aroha with this command. So enter, and now Aroha is running. So this terminal right here is acting as our Aroha network. Again, blockchain is supposed to be decentralized, right? And you're supposed to have the blockchain on everyone's computers. But for this tutorial, we're just going to have it in this one container, this one terminal, so that we can just, see how Aroha works. So our Aroha network is set up. It's all in this terminal. Go us. Good job. So next, we want to interact with Aroha by actually making some transactions. And you can see that we have some more commands to run. So you're going to open a brand new terminal, right click, open new terminal. Don't close the other one because that's where our blockchain is right now. If you do that, our blockchain goes down offline, which isn't good. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the Aroha command line tool. And right now we're going to log into our Docker Aroha. You can see that we're just going to, hopefully I entered the right password. No, I got it wrong. Sorry, that was a new mistake. So you can see we're logged in as Aroha right now in this Docker container. And we're going to launch the command line tool with this command. Oh, and you see we have some options. So again, we have our blockchain running in this terminal. And in this new terminal, we are logged in as admin@test, a certain account with the command line tool just to, create some transactions and play with Aroha for a bit, see how it works. So now that we're logged in as account.test, what should we do? Well, you can see that we have three options. We can create a new transaction, we can create a new query, or we can create a new transaction status request, which is, I guess, just checking how the status of a transaction is. So let's actually make a new transaction. So we had a farm example before. Let's go through it again. Let's try to model it. So we're going to press 1 to create a new transaction. And we have a bunch of commands that we're able to do. So if you want to go through these commands yourself, there's a picture right here on the website, or you can just pause the video and watch it yourself really quickly. Let me make this a little easy. Okay, so if you want to pause the video to go through these commands yourself, go ahead and pause right now and just read through it. Okay, so I assumed you did it. And what we want to do is first we want to model our srcmake farm. That's going to be our domain, right? We said it was our domain before. So you can see option 10 is create domain. So we're going to type 10 to create the domain. The domain ID is srcmake farm. And again, all these commands are like right here. So when you're doing this tutorial yourself, go ahead and just, do it yourself. So srcmake farm is our domain ID, and the role name. Remember, the role is just a group of permissions that a certain account has. In this case, our domain is going to have a certain amount of permissions, and we're going to give it the user permission, which was set up for us when we actually, in this tutorial, they set it up for us. So let's go ahead and look at that really quickly before we move on. So if we look at the code for the Genesis block, which is right here. So if you go to the actual GitHub code on Aroha, you can see that this is the Aroha project right here. It's all right here for you, open source on GitHub. And you can see that there's this example folder, which is what we're actually running right now. And you can see that there's this thing called, where is it? Genesis.block, and this is the first block. And you can see that the developers who contributed to this project set up the original block for us. And they set up a bunch of stuff. You can see that one is a role named user in the first block. They made this command and they gave it a bunch of permissions. We're just going to use that. So they set this up for us. When you do your own network, you're going to have to, set up your own permissions the way you need to. You'll need to, hopefully we have another blog post by then to go into detail. So do keep an eye out on this YouTube channel by subscribing. With that said, we created srcmake farm. And what do we want to do? Let's go back to our tutorial. So we created the farm, but let's actually add some sheep to our farm because we want to do that. So you can see, let's add one more command to the transaction. We're going to do that. And what do we need? This time we're going to create an asset because a sheep is a countable quantity, right? We're going to count our sheep. So hopefully we don't fall asleep. Get it? Because you're supposed to fall asleep if you count sheep. That's what people do. Anyway, our asset name is going to be sheep. What's the domain? It belongs to srcmake farm, right? It's our sheep. That's what we're doing. The precision is 0, which basically means, is there a decimal point? US dollars, how much can you break it up into? You can break it up into pennies, which is 2 decimal points. You can't break sheep up at all. Sheep are whole numbers. So the precision is 0. And what do we want to do now? Well, let's send it to the Aroha peer with option 2. And, that this just means we have our 2 commands. We're going to form it into one transaction. And we're going to push it onto the blockchain. So we're going to type option 2. And next it's going to ask us for the peer address. Well, we're sending it to localhost. That's what we're doing right now. And the port is 551. Well, not 500 and then 51. And you can see that our blockchain terminal updated a little bit because some stuff happened. So yeah, we made our domain srcmake farm and we made some sheep. But let's actually add some sheep to the farm because we have the asset named sheep, but we don't actually have any sheep on the farm yet. But we happen to have 50, so let's add 50 sheep. Let's model it in the blockchain. So let's create a new transaction by typing 1. And this time we are going to add an asset quantity. We're going to add 50 sheep. So we are going to type 16 to do that. And account ID. So who's going to get this sheep? Someone has to own this sheep, right? Well, we have an account named admin and @test. And this @test means that this admin belongs to the domain named test. This just set up for us. We're going to use it. We don't want to make the tutorial too long. So admin @test is going to be the account that is going to own these sheep. What is the asset ID? Well, it's sheep, and these sheep belong to srcmake farm. So you can see that this is the syntax for it. The account has an @ for the domain. The asset has a hashtag, which I don't even use Twitter. I don't know. It has a number sign for the actual domain. So just remember that. How many sheep do we have? We have 50. What's the precision? 0, because, it's not 5.0. A precision of 1 would mean 5.0. That's where the decimal point would go. So no, we have 50 sheep, 0 precision, and that's it. So once again, we're going to send this to Aroha. Localhost is the peer address. 551 is the port. It got sent successfully. We got our hash, and we can, do some more stuff in this terminal. And you saw that this one just updated. So yeah, that's pretty good for us so far. We have our srcmake farm. We have this admin @test guy that was already here. So we just gave him 50 of our sheep. So yeah, that's pretty good. So why don't we just check by making a query to see what the state of the blockchain actually is. That's what we're going to do in this final section. So we're going to type 2 this time to make a new query. And we are going to, you can see that there's a bunch of options here. So once again, if you want to pause the video to view this, or if you just want to go to the webpage, I'm going to give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Pause the video if you want to view this. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So the one we're going to choose is option 7. Option 7 is account assets ID. We're going to get the assets from a particular account. So let's type 7, and you'll see how this works. So what's the account that we're going to check right now? We're going to check admin @test because that's who we gave the sheep to. What's the asset ID? Again, it's sheep, and the sheep actually belong to not test. The sheep came from srcmake farm. They're from our brand. That's, our brand. So let's do that. And what happens next? We want to send this request to Aroha peer. You see the other option is to save it as JSON. Maybe you want to just save it in case you were doing a program and this would be easier for you. But no, let's just, send it to the peer by typing 1. Again, localhost 551. And you can see right here the results. So let's open this a little more, and you can see what happened. This is the response. You can see the account is admin @test. The asset is sheep at srcmake farm, and you can see that the balance is 50, which is exactly what we added. And that, in a nutshell, is Hyperledger Iroha. So you saw how we did it. We set up the example network, and we used the command line tool to make some transactions. We modeled our farm by creating the domain. We had this account set up. You could create your own account if you want to, but that's out of the scope of this tutorial. Don't have 20 minutes to do that. It's not 20 minutes, but it would take some time. We made this asset. We added some of this asset to this account, and yeah, that's really easy, right? Isn't that cool to model stuff? So that's Hyperledger Iroha. You now know how it works. You can try to use it yourself. And of course, we could have done more. We could have built a more complex model with more complicated queries. We could have explored the other transactions. Hopefully you do that yourself, or maybe I'll make another blog post and redo it. And we used Aroha from the command line, but I think there are some native programming language libraries for like Java and C++ if you want to access Aroha from there. So, take a look at that. Maybe we'll do another blog post on that probably. And of course, Aroha is open source and written in C++. The project is on GitHub. So if you want to contribute in any way, then go ahead, or if you just want to view the code yourself or see what's going on, go ahead and come to this page. It's all there for you to see thanks to these nice people who contribute, including me, sort of, because I'm sort of contributing now too. So yeah, so do keep an eye out on future tutorials. I might do other Hyperledger projects. I might go deeper into Aroha. So yeah, I'm srcmake. That was Hyperledger Iroha. Hit the subscribe and like button. Leave a comment if you want to see more content like this, because I will make more content if I do see people like it. So yeah, that was Hyperledger Iroha. Thanks for watching. And do get started and try to use it yourself. It's a really cool tool.